गुड आफ्टरनून। नमस्कार। साहित्य अकादमी द्वारा आयोजित साहित्योत्सव 2025 के सत्र में हम आप सबका स्वागत करते हैं। इस सत्र का विषय है भारत की साहित्यिक कृतियों में लुप्त होता ग्रामीण क्षेत्र, वैनिशिंग रूरल स्पेसेस इन इंडियन लिटरेरी क्रिएशंस। इस सत्र की अध्यक्षता कर रहे हैं श्री अरुण कमल और हमारे वक्तागण हैं बीना विश्वास, सी मृणालिनी, मामांगदाई, राघव चंद्रा, संजय हजारिका और तारेन बोरो। Before we begin, we'd like to tell our speakers to stay within 10 minutes. समय को ध्यान में रखते हुए कृपया 10 मिनट तक ही बोलें। मैं पहले आप सबसे निवेदन है आप अपने स्थान ग्रहण करें मंच पर। I request the Honorable Chair and the speakers to kindly take their places on the dais. हमारी पहली वक्ता है बीना विश्वास। बीना विश्वास, previously a professor of English language and communications at a cluster of institutions affiliated with JNTU Hyderabad, has a PhD in English literature and a specialization on Rabindranath Tagore from the Andhra universities. Ladies and gentlemen, I request you to kindly put your mobile phones on silent mode. आप सभी अपने मोबाइल फोन साइलेंट मोड पर कर लें। Beena Biswasji has penned 13 books comprising notable translations and poetry collections. She has actively participated in numerous national and international literary festivals and conferences. Additionally, she is a versatile translator, proficient in multiple languages. Dr. Biswas is an independent publisher and serves as the CEO of Rubric Publishing Solutions located in New Delhi. Beena Biswasji. And once again, I'll request everybody to kindly stay within 10 minutes. आपने मना किया था, I'm sorry. आपने मना किया था इसलिए. We'll begin with the opening remarks by the Honorable Chairperson, Shri Arun Kamal. आपके बारे में 2 शब्द. अरुण कमल जी एक प्रख्यात हिंदी कवि और लेखक हैं. उनके नाम 6 कविता संग्रह और 3 सिलेक्शन ऑफ पोएम्स हैं. एक साहित्यिक निबंधकार के रूप में उनके प्रकाशनों में आलोचनात्मक निबंध के 2 खंड, वार्तालापों की एक पुस्तक शामिल है. उन्होंने एक पद्य नाटक और एक आत्मा कथात्मक कथा भी प्रकाशित की है. बच्चों के लिए उन्होंने एक लघु उपन्यास और निबंधों का एक संग्रह निकाला है. उन्होंने बड़ी संख्या में कविताओं और निबंधों का हिंदी और अंग्रेजी में अनुवाद भी किया है. उन्हें साहित्य अकादमी पुरस्कार, भारतीय भाषा परिषद पुरस्कार तथा कलिंग अंतर्राष्ट्रीय साहित्य पुरस्कार आदि से सम्मानित किया जा चुका है. उन्हें 2021 में सार्क कवि सम्मेलन में भारत का प्रतिनिधित्व किया है. श्री अरुण कमल. आपने मना किया था. नहीं बस वो शुभ नाम.
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद साधना जी. आज के इस सत्र में मैं अपने सभी साथियों की ओर से आप सबका स्वागत और अभिनंदन करता हूं। अभी हम लोग इसके पहले बैठे हुए थे एक साथ, तो हम लोगों ने ये सोचा कि कुछ बातचीत हम लोग आपस में करेंगे, लेकिन वो सबके लिए होगी। फिर हम लोग यहाँ से भी बोलेंगे और चाहेंगे कि आप भी कुछ बोलें। आपके कोई सवाल हो या आप कुछ कहना चाहें तो आपका स्वागत है। आप बोलें और टिप्पणी भी करें, लेकिन उसके लिए आखिर में जब हम सब लोग अपनी अपनी बात कह लें तो आखिर में जो समय बचे 10-15 मिनट जो भी हो उसमें हम लोग ये करेंगे। जैसा बताया उन्होंने, 10 मिनट हम सब लोग बोलेंगे, उसके बाद फिर ये खुला सत्र होगा। तो अब उसके बाद साधना जी को हम बोलेंगे कि इस विषय पर बुलाने के लिए जो क्रम उन्होंने तय किया है उसके अनुसार बुलाएं। बस संक्षेप में हमको यही कहना है शुरू में कि कभी हमने सोचा नहीं था कि वैनिशिंग रूरल स्पेसेस इन इंडियन लिटरेरी क्रिएशंस, इस पर भी बात हो सकती है, क्योंकि हमको कभी ऐसा लगा ही नहीं। अभी हजारिका साहब कह रहे थे कि वी ऑल कम फ्रॉम विलेजेस। रूसी भाषा में एक कहावत है, स्क्रैच ए रशन एंड फाइंड ए तातार। किसी भी रशन को अगर तुम जरा सा चमड़ी उसको छीलोगे तो अंदर से पाओगे कि वो तातार है। So we all people, whether we live in Bombay or Delhi or Kolkata or Chennai or Bangalore, we all are basically people from villages. Even the way we walk in our Mahanagar shows that we haven't yet forgotten our old gait, walking our streets in our villages. So this is still true of Indian literature as well. Indian literature basically a literature that is rooted in the village life. But our villages are no longer the same villages. Our villages have changed. And when I first went to Kerala, I was surprised to find there are no villages as such that we have in Bihar. All these villages are merging with the country towns or towns proper. And I was really surprised because in Bihar at the time, there were remote villages without electricity, without motorable roads. But things are changing and things have changed. One thing we all know from our experience that today it's very difficult to feel the dark of the night. Even our villages are so bright during the nights that we haven't experienced that mystery of darkness for the past several years. So things have changed, things are changing. Still, there are villages, and we will talk about that. And we have a very distinguished panel here. They all they are the best representatives from their languages, and not only from their languages, they are the best we have in the Indian subcontinent. So I welcome our fellow panelists too. And now over to Sadhana ji.
मैंने बिना विश्वास जी का परिचय दे ही दिया है, तो आपसे निवेदन है आप अपने वक्तव्य रख लेते हैं। हेलो हेलो।
Namaskar. Very good afternoon to Arun Kamal sir and fellow panelists. ये टॉपिक बड़ा पेचीदा है, ये वैनिश होके भी नहीं हो रहा है एक्चुअली। I will take you on a journey through the world of Indian literature today. one that is deeply intertwined with the rural landscapes of our country. For centuries, villages have formed their heart of Indian storytelling, providing a backdrop of tales of love, struggle, and transformation. With rapid urbanization and economic shifts, these rural spaces are slowly disappearing, not just in reality, but also in literature. Many modern narratives are set in cities, leaving behind the pastoral landscapes that once dominated literary heritage all over the world. But how does this matter? Rural spaces in literature are not just geographical locations. They represent way of life, a deep connection with nature, and a sense of rootedness that is fast eroding. Through the works of Gopinath Mohanty, Sharchandra Chattopadhyay, and Munshi Premchand, we see the richness of rural life and its gradual disintegration. We also find similar themes in English literature in the works of Thomas Hardy, D.H. Lawrence, who documented the loss of traditional rural communities long back. Russian literature too mourns the vanishing rural world. Gorky in Mother and the Lower Depths portrays the harsh, vanishing rural world. Maxine rural world, realities of the peasants and working class, highlighting how industrialization and political upheaval displace rural communities. Chekhov, in stories like The Peasants, captures the bleak yet deeply human lives of Russian villagers, showing how economic hardships force them into an uncertain future. Similarly, American literature has long been fascinated by the decline of rural life. In The Grapes of Wrath, John Steinbeck paints a harrowing picture of dust bowl farmers forced to abandon their lands due to economic devastation. William Faulkner, in novels like The Sound and the Fury, explores how the once proud southern countryside disintegrates under social and economic pressures. Today, let us explore how these writers captured the beauty and struggles of rural India, Russia, and America, and why this world is fading from our stories now. Indian literature has been deeply rooted in village life. Rural spaces were not just settings, but living, breathing entities, shaping the destinies of characters. Writers like Gopinath Mohanty in Odisha, Sharachandra Chattopadhyay in Bengal, Premchand in North India wrote about the struggles, aspirations, and tragedies of village folk, giving us unforgettable narratives of resilience. Gopinath Mohanty's Paraja, we have seen a vivid portrayal of tribal life in Odisha. The protagonist, Shukuru Jani, and his family live in a simple yet fulfilling life until the forces of modern exploitation invade their world. At one heartbreaking moment, Shukuru Jani reflects, to quote, "The land is like a mother. We till it, we love it, we live by it. But now it is being taken from us, and we stand powerless like trees that have lost their roots." Unquote. These words resonate even today as countless rural communities are displaced in the name of development. On the other hand, Sharachandra Chattopadhyay belonged to Bihar, Darbhanga, one of Bengal's most beloved writers, also immortalized rural life in his works. His novel Shikanto paints a picturesque view of Bengal's villages where traditions and nature coexist. But as Shikanto travels, he witnesses the slow decay of rural life. To quote, "The fields, once golden with crops, now stand barren. The rivers that sang through our childhood are now silent, their banks swallowed by concrete." unquote. This deep nostalgia runs through Sharchandro's works, capturing the gradual vanishing rural spaces under the weight of industrialization. Munshi Premchand, often regarded as the voice of rural India, took this theme further in Godan. The novel follows Hori, a poor farmer who dreams of owning a cow but is trapped in a cycle of debt and suffering. His struggle mirrors the reality of many Indian farmers who, despite their hard work, find themselves at the mercy of landlords and moneylenders even today. In one powerful passage, Premchand writes to quote, the land which had once been his pride now seemed to mock him. It gave him life, it took everything from him, unquote. The tragic vision of rural India where the land becomes a burden rather than a blessing remains painfully relevant even today. Mahashweta Devi, one of the most powerful voices in Indian literature, also documented the suffering of rural and tribal communities. Her novel, Aranya Udhikar, The Rights of the Forest, brings to light the struggles of the tribal people against exploitation and displacement, particularly focusing on the rebellion of Birsa Munda. In Dobti, she portrays the brutal oppression of rural women, showing how systemic violation erodes not just their land but their very identity. In Maharashtra, authors like Vishwas Patil and Ranjit Desai have explored the complexities of rural life and historical transitions. Vishwas Patil's Jhada Jhaditi, The Landless, provides a searing account of farmers displaced due to industrialization, reflecting the ongoing struggles of rural communities in Maharashtra. Assamese literature, too, has beautifully preserved the essence of rural landscapes. The works of Lakshminath Bezbarua and Birendra Kumar Bhattacharya capture the rhythm of life in Assam's villages. Bhattacharya's Ayurvingam highlights the struggles of tribal communities against external influences. The rural world is rich with myths, traditions, and deep ecological wisdom. These authors remind us that even as urbanization advances, the heart of India's literary soul still beats in its villages. The vanishing rural spaces is not just an Indian reality. It is a universal theme reflected in the world literature. Thomas Hardy, one of England's greatest novelists, mourned the loss of rural England in his works, The Tess. Tess is a simple country girl, finds her life overturned by forces beyond her control. Hardy describes the changing landscape. To quote, the trees that once stood as silent witnesses to time have been cut down, and the fields where laughter once echoed now lie beneath stone and steel. Unquote. This lament for disappearing countryside mirrors the concerns raised by Indian writers like Mohanty and Premchand. D.H. Lawrence, another English writer, explored the emotional toll of losing rural spaces. His novel, The Rainbow, speaks of how industrialization disturbs rural life. The people of the land, once so deeply bound to it, now drift like leaves in the wind, lost in a world they do not recognize. Much like Indian literature, English literature captures the profound sorrow of losing a way of life that had sustained generations. Today, literature is increasingly shifting its focus to cities. Though we have, as per 2023 census, 63.64% people lives in villages. The bustling energy of urban life, the complexities of modern existence, and the pace of technology dominate contemporary narratives. This change reflects a larger societal shift. More people live in cities than in villages, and rural livelihoods are declining. As a result, the stories of villages, their traditions, and their people are slowly fading from literary imagination. Some modern writers continue to highlight the transformations taking place in rural India. Amitav Ghosh's The Hungry Tide brings attention to the fragile ecosystem of the Sundarbans, where rural communities struggle against nature and development. Similarly, Arundhati Roy's The God of Small Things captures the socio-political changes in rural Kerala, showing how traditions are slowly giving way to modern influences. These works prove that while rural spaces may be disappearing, their echoes still find a place in literature. I have time? No, okay. Thank you. I'll close here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is C. Mrinalini ji. C. Mrinalini is a well-known Telugu writer. She has received several awards and honors such as Vedagiri Purna Chandra Rao Award, Vasireddy Yadana Pudu Award, Kavitraya Award, and others. Mrinalini ji is a member of the guest faculty for Institute of Public Enterprise, National Institute of Nutrition, and is the convener of Sahitya Akademi's Telugu Advisory Board. Presently, she is preparing an electronic dictionary from English to Telugu, besides translating biography of Mirza Ghalib and Gulzar's short stories. C. Mrinalini ji.
Thank you for the introduction. Don't mistake me for sitting here, but I and my colleague here, we both decided that once we stand there, we may talk for half an hour. So we've been told that we have only 10 minutes. So it's better to make it something like a discussion panel instead of sitting and standing and giving a lecture, because we don't trust ourselves near the mic standing there. That's the reason I'm talking from here, because after 10 minutes, she can warn me and I can give the mic to her. And since the topic is very vast and I have only 10 minutes, I'm going to make it a conceptual presentation rather than reading out names or showing you how well it has been written in Telugu or any other languages. I am glad that my predecessor made a very comprehensive review of Indian literature. So now, though I'm confined to Telugu, I'm just making a conceptual one because so that any language can take it as they want to. First of all, I think I'm going to see this topic, describe this topic in three phases, three spaces. The first space is the romantic space. When rural life was highly romanticized, rural life meant joint family system, rural life meant large green fields and men and women working together. Rural life meant small condiment shop, a barber shop, a tailor shop, a small get-together place, which in Telugu we call Rasavanda, where you solve problems, and there is one Mukhya, someone who solves your problems. There is one for all and all for one mentality, where everybody is together. So this is the ideal we have in the old literature, in the early 20th century, 21st century, 20th century, I would say. The literature actually told us that going back to village is the best possible experience. So in literature too, if there is a city bred, a city living person, he would go back to the village and he would be so happy there. He would often find a girl there and get married to her, fall in love with her and get married to her too. So that was the romantic ideal phase of rural life in the first phase. That is the first space. Then I'm coming to the second space. The second space where after 1990, when you have all the economic reforms that entered the country, and so we have, and later it went to globalization, up to the globalization. So when we come to that stage, you can see that I would call this phase a soulless space. The first one is a romantic and ideal space. This one is a soulless space because physically there is a village. There is rural space still there. But instead of all the small barber shops or condiment shops or the life living togetherness, the togetherness has slowly evaporated. And now we have lakes are destroyed. You have multiplexes there. You have film theaters instead of the open theater for all folk art forms to be performed earlier, like a Harikatha or a Burrakatha or any folk dance was performed earlier. You no longer have them. So here the space is still there. The village is still there. But still the soul is gone. Because what actually defines a village, the rural atmosphere, that has gone. Physically, it is still there, The rural space is still going on. So this is where you can see that NRI comes from, I'm talking about literature, an NRI comes from America, he wants and goes to see his village, he is shocked. He is getting the ultra-modern Javed Habib haircut in a village. Why is he getting a Javed Habib haircut in a village? He used to have a happily small, well-known barber whom he used to like, whom he used to chat with. Now, no. Village has become so modernized, which is in the name of development, obviously. It is all called development. So that it has lost its true nature. Now it's no longer the village, it is physically the village. The space is still physically there, but I would say figuratively. Figuratively, it is now no longer a village. It has become modernized. It has lost its sheen. It has lost its originality. It has lost its speciality because it's like any other thing. What globalization has done to everybody in the, in the world. So everybody, they were only patterns. We don't have human beings. There are only patterns. You just fall into this pattern or that pattern. So that is what happened to the village in the second space. So rural space in the second phase, it would be figuratively vanished. In the first space, it has not vanished. It is very much there. Second space, it has vanished, but only figuratively. It is still there. So this is the village which has been depicted more often in literature, by short stories, poetry, or novel, wherever. Now I come to the third space. The third space is where the present space, where village itself has physically vanished. Some places there are no villages. Villages which were there are no longer there. Now I'm talking literally vanished, not figuratively. The second space is gone. We have all gone through the second phase. We all thought that was development. We were happy in one way because villagers also are following the latest dresses fashions. They're also going to pub culture is already there. Everybody has OTTs. Everybody has phones. We're all happy. It's happened. In the whole gamut of this, the village has lost its own originality, its own, what I would say, the guileless village man is no longer there. Village is as criminal as any other place now. So that in that second space, we thought at least, okay, we are going to live with this. Still there is a village. Still I can go to my village, probably sit there and nostalgically remember the village that was. So the first romantic space was obviously became only nostalgic. The second space lost, spiritually it lost. And what is the third space? Third space is where village literally vanished. So this is very well depicted by two Telugu writers of recent origin. They're young writers. One of them is actually presenting a story, I think, in 2-3 days in our Festival of Letters also. Swarna Kilari and Naresh Kumar Sufi. Both of them have written stories where village has physically vanished. It is not a question of spiritually vanishing. These two villages, both of them talk about Singareni collieries. The villages around Singareni is a coal mine. The coal mine faced it, and their villages have literally vanished because they were shocked to see that the village they were there. They were going back to, they had studied at least up to 5th class or 6th class. They are no longer there. So he calls about Mangalipalle. Mangalipalle is the novel. The Memories of Mangalipalle is the short story collection of Sufi. He writes in that short story collection. He went there once near and just around Singareni collieries. One barber comes there and he finds some space so that he can live there. He starts a shop and slowly other people come, other professionals come and they also settle there. So it turns into a village. For 25 years, everybody is sitting very happily there. And Singareni collieries came, so they all had work. So they were all working there. Suddenly, open cast mining. Once the open cast mining has come, workers are no longer required. Very few workers are required there. So they're thrown out of their jobs. So they have to migrate. So migration started happening and they started coming to cities. So slowly, when people leave, what can the professions do? What can the shops do? All the shops started getting closed. One by one, everybody started migrating to the city. So at the end of the story, he begins the story with the beginning of when the Rajaya, the barber who has come in the first place, and the end of the story, the same Rajaya is the only one left. He's now an old man. He's too sentimental. He doesn't want to leave the place, but there are no houses around him. There's nothing around him. His barber shop is also not there. Only he is walking around. So his own village, the village he himself has started, has simply vanished. And Swarnakilari writes Nalavangaram Kathalu. Same thing happens. All the school students who are now in colleges and professions, they go back to their original school. Once they go to the school, they see that where is my school? They remember the locality. They remember the locations to start running after it and searching for it. They don't find their school. So it has been demolished. So many places, the small theater they were used to visit every weekend, that is demolished. The tea shop where they all used to drink tea, that has vanished. Everything has been demolished. They can only see Kacha Road, nothing else. The original Kacha place where there was no village. So once this modernization comes to such an extent that people migrating is one aspect. Everybody knows that. When we talk about rural spaces, the first thing we say it is affected mainly because of migrations. They no longer have their professions. Quite obviously, they can't do their original jobs, even though they were qualified only to do that. So they have to migrate to cities and take up whatever job they can. So that is one part of it. But more tragic than that is the fact that their village itself has no existence. So when we're talking about rural spaces vanishing, I thought vanishing in a figurative sense, we can say everywhere. It happens. In the course of development of a nation, vanishing in a figurative sense happens. Villages still are physically there, but mentally they are already cities. They're already modernized. But when we come to a stage when villages literally vanish, I think that is when we have to take stock of the situation. We have to think about it. Probably we have to think about our development mode. So what we are doing? What we are doing, is it really necessary? Is this how we should live? Can we go back to nature? Like Wordsworth said, we can't go back to nature, quite obviously. But at least mentally, can we retain at least that rural culture? Whatever was good in the rural phase, whatever was good in the rural mentality, can we at least retain that even if though we are living in the city? This last one would be one for all and all for one. That is mostly the rural motto. At least that, can we at least retain that, though we are living here, as Arun Kamalji was saying, we are all basically from villages. So that motto is something we can retain if we really want the rural space to be alive, though physically we are all in the cities. Thank you.
Thank you very much for keeping with the time. Exactly. हमारी अगली वक्ता है मामांग दाई। अरुणाचल प्रदेश की मामांग दाई कवयित्री और उपन्यासकार हैं। वे पूर्व पत्रकार और अरुणाचल प्रदेश यूनियन ऑफ वर्किंग जर्नलिस्ट के अध्यक्ष हैं। उनकी पहली पुस्तक अरुणाचल प्रदेश द हिडन लैंड को राज्य का वेरियर एल्विन अवार्ड मिला था। उन्होंने वर्ल्ड वाइड फंड फॉर नेचर इन द ईस्टर्न हिमालयन बायोडाइवर्सिटी हॉटस्पॉट्स प्रोग्राम के साथ काम किया और अरुणाचल प्रदेश लोक सेवा आयोग की सदस्य रही। 2011 में उन्हें पद्मश्री और 2017 में अंग्रेजी में लिखी गई उनकी किताब द ब्लैक हिल के लिए साहित्य अकादमी पुरस्कार से सम्मानित किया गया। मामांग दाई।
Thank you for the introduction, respected chair, my co-panelists. Actually, this is really quite a vast subject, as Mronalini Madam has said. There are pros and cons. I come from a very rural background, Arunachal Pradesh. My hometown is Pasighat. We say town. Recently, I was editing a book called In Search of the Indian Village by Aleph Book Publishers. So I did a little bit of research. A village is bigger than a hamlet and it's smaller than a town. I Googled my hometown and it popped up, but now it has a municipality and it's even designated as a city. So I think the previous speakers, which very interesting batein nikale regarding, transit, spaces, first and second space, what is happening to the Indian village? Because our founding fathers we had were, Gandhiji was, villages are the soul of a nation. If the Indian village perishes, so will the nation perish. We know Dr. Ambedkar had very different views on an Indian village because it was the den of casteism, it was inequity. So there were many things that were thought about. I also feel, you know, as writers, we return to the village or rural spaces as our source material. We write about villages, but we don't actually live in the village. If you live in a village, you'll know that either village almost equated with indigeneity or environment, nature, उसमें ये बात आ जाता है either you're very protective, just like with tribal communities, or you're very romantic. But if you actually live in a village, the reality may be quite different. So to be able to transmit that in writing, I think people like, say, Vijaydan ji, I read one of his stories called So Many Hitlers, and it's about rural Rajasthan, but there are these very strong, you know, agriculturalist brothers who are going to buy a tractor, and then what happens on the road. So people from the villages are also not pure and pristine. Waisa bhi nahi hai. There are things to consider because the human element is the human element in the village or the cities. So I think to go forward, like Madam Runalini was saying, if we can keep that idea, the character of a rural space and what it meant to many of us to begin with as places of origin where you were born and the place where you might return to, the Indian village, your home place. If we could keep that and all the good that it embodies, originally embodied, then it might be worth keeping the idea of a village alive. Why I say alive? Because in the global world today, you'll find villages are merging with cities. It's inevitable. There's no going back to that second space or third space, जिसने आप बोला था. It's in transit. In Arunachal itself also, to be specific, the transit is already happening with mainly, let's say, the weapon of language. People in the villages are using a new language. The mother tongue is no longer used for writing. So already it is changing. It has gone beyond transit also. People are using a new language. Then there is religion. The religious aspects are coming in with globalization, with new frontiers, you know, new exposures, and new knowledge systems being introduced from all over the world. So obviously it is all being changed. Our chairperson, our chairman, Arun Kamalji has very rightly said, villages are electrified and the mystery of darkness is no longer there. I think that is very poetic. I would like to leave more for audience participation and conclude here for now.
Thank you. I will now invite Mr. Raghav Chandra ji. Raghav Chandra, a former civil servant, is the author of the critically acclaimed novels Scent of a Game and Kali's Daughter. Editor of The Eternal Wisdom of the Tribes, he also writes on management and sustainability issues and has a monthly column in Business World magazine. वे ऐप कंसल्ट के संस्थापक और सीईओ हैं, सोसाइटी फॉर कल्चर एंड एनवायरनमेंट के अध्यक्ष हैं और भोपाल लिटरेचर एंड आर्ट फेस्टिवल के निदेशक हैं, जिसके 4 सफल संस्करण संपन्न हो चुके हैं. आप हार्वर्ड यूनिवर्सिटी यूएसए के एडवर्ड एस मेसन फेलो और दिल्ली यूनिवर्सिटी के पूर्व छात्र हैं. श्री राघव चंद्र.
But I'll take 10 minutes only. Arun Kamal Sahab, members on the dais. Literature is born out of human sensibilities, experiences, and perceptions. It cannot ever be alienated from the environment and the reality from which it builds itself into a narrative. So when we were largely a rural society, rural spaces found more than their share in the stories that were told, because the authors had more experience of the rural areas than of the urban areas. Today, when we have urbanized largely, with almost 35 to 40% of our population living in the cities and contributing to about 75% of our GDP, and exposed to the global ideas, it is but natural that rural spaces should get proportionately less attention. But by speaking about vanishing rural spaces, there is a sense of anguish, as if we are ruminating and ruing the fact that we have lost these spaces. I would go and take a very contrarian sort of position by saying that we should not unreasonably idolize rural spaces and try and draw a dichotomy between the rural and the non-rural spaces as one being good and the other being bad, and so on. For a writer, it is the story that defines the trajectory of its protagonists, and there cannot be a value distinction between rural and urban. I would not favor the importance of rural over the urban unless it is seminal and germane to the plot and to the story. Ultimately, every human being is important. And it is not because of the fact that they live either in a rural space or in an urban space, but because of their acts, because of their emotions, because of the interactions with people, the society, the nature, the environment, and the story that has to come out of them or that they have to tell. It is the story that drives and determines the value of literature. Any story can be enticing and gripping, no matter where it is set, as long as it resonates with the reader. Only then will it carry meaning and heft. That having been said, we have to accept that in our minds, particularly in India, we have been divided between rural and urban, not just in terms of sociological or geographical silos, but we have, and as one of the speakers mentioned, perhaps because of our respect for Gandhiji and his propounding the concept of the village Swaraj, that life in villages is simple and people living in villages are meek and humble, unsullied by the greed and complexities of urban world, that we equate the rural areas with poverty, with the lack of riches, and perhaps for that reason, with higher values. Sada Jivan Uch Vichar. This is not entirely true. When it comes to crime or when it comes to other social malpractices, they are as rampant in rural areas, whether it's infanticide, female infanticide, caste oppression, aggression towards women, as they are in urban areas. That also having been said, I would say, and sort of further propound that it is entirely the plot of the story which matters. Whether it is R.K. Narayan's Malgudi days, irrespective of where that has been set, it is the storyline which is interesting. The storyline which connects all the dots of the people, the landscape, the customs, and so on. Whether it is Premchand's Godan or Raja Rao's Kanthapura or Mahashweta Devi's writings, all of them are basically plot, narrative, story, character-based. The rural or the urban is important, but only peripherally. In Pather Panchali, which was been converted into a film by Satyajit Ray, that is Bibhuti Bhushan Bandyopadhyay's story. Again, it is the characters, and that is why it was made into such an evocative trilogy of films, because the characters speak. It is not that they are located here or whether they are located there. Whether it is Arundhati Roy's The God of Small Things, or Perumal Murugan's One Part Woman, or Amitabh Ghosh's writings on the environment, or more recently Gitanjali Shri's writings, they're all character driven. My own book, Kali's Daughter, I would say, which is set in an urban setting, has as much about social issues as any story written in the rural, about the rural areas, because it talks of a Dalit girl who in a modern setting joins the Indian Foreign Service and has to face caste-based exploitation, which is not burning of a house, which is not rape, which is not being thrown out or evicted from your residential village, but is more psychological. It is in the nature of the discussions that take place. It is in the nature of, it's in the nuances that are conveyed in the Lal Bahadur Shastri Academy when she's sitting for dinner or when she's playing badminton with her colleagues, that convey the level of exploitation that caste can have on a person, and psychological effects can be as damaging and as traumatic as more physical acts of oppression. Mulk Raj Anand's Untouchable was set in a cantonment town of Bula Shaha. It is no less a tale of enticing and provocative, full of emotions and a theme of social justice. Slapping an untouchable who's expected to shout that here is a Dalit, here is a Chamar who's present, an uninvestigated sexual assault, and the sheer pompousness of the elite. Sorry. And before I close, I'll just take one more minute. You know, I'm not much of a Hindi writer or reader, but there is one particular story which we read in school, which was part of our textbook, which resonates with me even till today. And Arun Kamal Saab and the other writers here would be more familiar with it, which is Har Ki Jeet. Now, a story like Har Ki Jeet is a simple story. It's a 2.5-page story which talks of Baba Bharti and his love for his horse, Sultan. Daku Khadak Singh likes the horse and steals the horse. And then he goes away with the horse. But when he's leaving, Baba Bharti just tells him one thing. किसी को ये मत बताना इस घटना के बारे में, क्योंकि लोगों का नहीं तो गरीबों के प्रति विश्वास उठ जाएगा. And when he finally ruminates and, you know, reflects on what has transpired and why Baba Bharti has said this, he's so upset with what he has done that he returns the horse. And both of them, Baba Bharti and Khadak Singh, they have shed tears at the same spot. And it's a very, very, very touching story. दोनों के आंसुओं का उसी भूमि की मिट्टी पर परस्पर मिलाप हो गया. Now, this is a simple story. It could have been set in a cantonment or in the army cantonment areas. It could have been set in a village. The rural or the urban is not material. It is the storyline. It is the characters. It is the human emotions which are important. In conclusion, it is the narrative and the context that is important. We don't have to worry about rural spaces vanishing. We have just to ensure that nothing is left out and that there are no prohibited zones, no blackouts, no no-go territories. Stories and literature have to be from the heart. They have to be felt, not seen. Thank you.
थैंक यू. मैं यहाँ सभी जो उपस्थित हैं आपसे विनम्र निवेदन करती हूँ, आप अपने मोबाइल फोन्स को प्लीज स्विच ऑफ कर दें या साइलेंट मोड पर रखें, और यदि बात करनी है तो बाहर जाकर करें. धन्यवाद. Our next speaker is Mr. Sanjoy Hazarika. Sanjoy Hazarika is a renowned author, journalist, filmmaker, policy analyst, and human rights advocate. Author of 5 books, including the acclaimed Strangers of the Mist and Strangers No More. Besides a travelogue and co-edited works, he has scripted and produced over a dozen documentaries. His essays have appeared in peer-reviewed journals. A former reporter for New York Times, he founded the Center for Northeast Studies and Policy Research in India and pioneered the Boat Clinic initiative on the Brahmaputra. He served as International Director of the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative and as member of the National Security Advisory Board. Mr. Sanjoy Hazarika.
Thank you, Sadhana. And respected chair and fellow panelists and members of the Sahitya Academy and participants here. I've really written down a few points and I just want to share them because I think previous speakers have covered almost the entire universe that we were supposed to cover But I'll share a few thoughts for what they're worth. I run the risk of being a non-fiction writer in a panel largely of fiction writers and poets. So I think the village travels with us wherever we go. I think that's one of the things that I've learned in my own travels and professional career, whether it's because I have often written about conflict in my books, conflict and the impact of conflict on women, on communities, on village groups, and how resilient people are, especially women, when they have to cope with it. And the stories that emerge from these tellings, from the stories that emerge from the listening, are the stories that perhaps I don't reflect as much as novelists such as Mitra Fukan, Arupa Patangya Kolita, Eastern Kire, and others who are all celebrators, authors, writers in English from the Northeast, Temsula Au, whose classic is These Hills Called Home. They reflect. I try and do it in a documented, a flowing narrative, but theirs is a more popular genre. But through myth and reality, through grief and joy, we endure, we capture, and we engage with these stories. Now, just like all our lives, we've all come from somewhere else. I am certainly not a resident of Delhi. I've just come yesterday from Shillong. Mamang has come from Itanagar, and all of us have come from different places. We carry our stories with us. And our stories change, just our lives change, our friendships change. And the nature of the village, as we've heard from our previous speakers, also has changed. As they come into cities, but the village still comes with them. The other way that I think I was going to say that instead of vanishing, we should say transiting rural landscapes, because that is the nature of our world, of our country, of the places we live. Language also travels with people. That's an oxymoron. But I'll tell you one story, which I found really fascinating. When I was traveling in Nagaland and then into Myanmar, Burma, I found there is a language, a patois, which is called Nagamese. Now, it's not a recognized language, but it is a language that 16 tribes of Nagaland speak because they can't understand each other in their own dialect. So to speak to each other, they have to use Nagamese, which is a mixture of Assamese and the local dialect. Now that language actually traveled with insurgents and rebels who were walking to China in the 60s and 70s to get training in camps. That language is now spoken across hundreds of kilometers of Myanmar, because that is the travel route that they took. And although they aren't active in such actions anymore, the language is still there. The other way it travels is by river. Now, one of my books that's coming out later this year, hopefully, is a travelogue on the Brahmaputra from Tibet to the Bay of Bengal. I've been privileged to do that. And you find that whether you're in Assam or on the cusp of Assam and Bangladesh, you find there's a dialect called Bhatia or Bhatiali. And people say he's speaking in Bhatia. And you'll find on either side of the border, this language is spoken. It doesn't mean that the people are nationals of each other's countries. It means that the language has transgressed, has traveled over boundaries because it is traveled by a river which no boundary can check. One of perhaps the greatest lyricist, writer, musician that Assam has known, certainly in the last 100 years is Dr. Bhupen Hazarika. Entirely all his compositions were rooted either in the river or its environment or in the villages, because he himself came from a very small village until he was discovered as a talented young singer when he was 10 years old. So all these remained with him, and he brought it not just to Assam, but he took it to Bengal and to the entire landscape of India through Bollywood. And I think that is something that we cannot appreciate enough. Because even though we say that villages are vanishing, and they are, we find that the stories of villages through lyrics, through plays, theater, cinema. How many films do you see that are not located, at least in some area in villages? These are also part of our visual culture, the languages we understand, the appreciation that we show to literature. I currently moved from Delhi after nearly 40 years, and I live now in a small town called Shillong. It's small compared to Delhi and many of the places you come from. It's a growing town, but each locality has got a local council. It's not the government. It's called a Darbar Shtong. And our friends from Shillong and Assam will know it. The Darbar is made up of communities with a headman, and they inform you when there will be local meetings, when there'll be a local cleanup, when there will be things that the community does together. And you find that also in other parts of the region, other parts of the Northeast. I think that, ma'am, you spoke very touchingly of the vanishing villages. I remember a story of a friend of mine who's an editor in Nepal, and he's also a very avid trekker. So he said, one thing that I've noticed in my treks in the Himalaya is that where the tracks vanish, old tracks vanish, the village has gone. There's no way if people are not moving on that track, then it has been abandoned. Same thing in Uttarakhand and other places. People have migrated to the cities. So the village may have died, but the people have moved. The people are still alive. And one of the things I think which has really made a difference to village life is the whole ability to connect. I'm not just talking about roads, but also digital connectivity. You may not have the best connectivity, but you do have connectivity. And that is making a lot of difference to storytelling, to capturing news, to documenting events, and sharing your life. I'll close there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our last speaker is Mr. Taren Boro. Mr. Taren Boro, an eminent Bodo writer and a former president of Bodo Sahitya Sabha, is currently the convener of Sahitya Academy's Bodo Advisory Board. He writes short stories, plays, and poems in Assamese and English, apart from Bodo. He has acted in Bodo and Assamese films, is a stage dramatist, has worked as a casual announcer for All India Radio Guwahati. His writings have appeared in national and local newspapers, and he retired as a manager from the Reserve Bank of India, Guwahati. He has received several awards and honors, including the M. Ibrahim Ali Literary Award, the Assam Sports and Cultural Award, and the Jananeta Bhimbar Deori Award. Mr. Taren Boro.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chairperson and panelists, and August gathering, my dear friends, participants, and officials of Sahitya Academy, New Delhi. I must thank Saito Academy for inclusion of my name in the panel discussion, especially on the topic, here vanishing rural space in Indian literary creation. It is a very tough topic. I don't say that I'll be very confident to say about the topics. Only as Saito Academy allotted me 10 minutes, just in a nutshell, I would like to narrate some my writings shortly, what I find. So I am hailing from a downtrodden tribal community from Assam. I think you have heard Kokrajhar. Now then, our style, Golpara district now divided into Kokrajhar district. It is a tribal dominated, Boro dominated area. So since I am hailing from a rural area, especially our community actually is a very painful community. Education and other things, economically backward area. Since we are coming from that area, as I understand the meaning of the above subject means the emergence of global influence in all tradition, Indian literature, literary forms, the traditional life, customs, beliefs, and social picture, this appearing in literature due to outbreak of modern plots, character, and form of literature. What I understand. Because when I was a child, a small boy, studying in the LP school, lower primary school, my grandmother, grandfather, they used to sit in the floor at the night time. There was no light, nothing. So they're telling some ballads and stories and the folk tales. They just called young boys and girls and one Gaura village headman in the courtyard. They are sitting 2 hours, 3 hours. They used to tell the stories. Hundreds of stories, hundreds of ballads, hundreds of folk tales. They are telling. The story of monkey and fox, the story of pig and dog, the story of this tiger and a monkey, like this. So it was like a creation of literature, actually. That time, only the spoken words, only telling the stories, nobody wants to write. Or in letter spirit, some writers come out. They used to write, they used to collect these stories, and it is transformed as literature. But this literature now, Boro, as you know, now it is a schedule of the Indian Constitution. From 2023, the Boro language has been recognized in the 8th schedule of the Indian Constitution. And we are very lucky, this language read up to university level. And it is one of the official languages of Assam. So the reasons may be behind global impact on socio-economic condition in our day-to-day life. I understand. Digital platform and role of artificial intelligence, people once new way of life. Because the elite group of people, even the students community, they are not willing to stay in the villages due to so and so regions. They are not willing to serve the village people. They just take education and they will just migrate to town and cities. I think it may be a lifestyle or employment or suitable medical treatment. Because as you go in the village, even today, no light, no drinking water, even today. So one of the speaker, he said, in the northeastern region, as you know, including Manipur, Mizoram, Meghalaya, Arunachal, including Assam, we have multilingual communities. We have own spoken words. We have own indigenous language and culture and literature. Even in Nagaland, if you go, even in Assam, we can understand Assamese. Assamese is a guardian language of Assam. But our language, or Missing Rabha like this, these languages are quite different. Their pronunciation is different. In Manipur, there are so many tribes other than Meitei. I know. So this language, actually we have seen composite in English only. Whatever you go in the church, then they used to just something in English. That I know. That is very difficult to narrate the situation. Cross-credited impact on our social life and influence of digital literature. Immediate urbanization transformation from village to city, town for better livelihood and employment. To seek better opportunities and health care, production of modern food grains and techniques of new profitable technology in agricultural sector, using power tiller and machines in the old pattern of agricultural concept. To seek drinking water and health care and proper scientific medical treatment, leaving the old treatment system in the past by the tantras and mantras and kobiras and ozas. Whenever you go, that time you recall, there were no medical, there were no pharmacy. People believe tantra mantra. People believe this Ayurvedic people. They're just hunting mantras and tantras. Then just they will give medical treatment like this. This is the transformation. To seek drinking water, it is already done. Forgetting all methods of handloom and textile concept along with artisan and mechanical techniques. Emancipation of oral literature, tradition, ballads and proverbs, and followed modern writing system to attract a new generation based on e-learning, e-education, e-teaching concept in the modern globalized era. In 2020, new education policy also said this thing. globalization, e-teaching, e-learning, e-education. Online system in lieu of books and hard copies, as people no time apart from day-to-day life. This is also one concern. Introduction of Google's translation apps can be vanished and rural space of literature in the present context. So in India, also advancement of new technology in marching for the better livelihood of mankind challenging with other advanced countries. As Madam said, I acted in the 12 Bodo films and 2 in Assamese, 3 in TV serial. So my basic writing is short story. I write one story, Delhi product in Boro, and one story that is easy money, narrating some basic problems of the people, urban and rural difference. And also I acted 2 cinemas as one minister and one MLA. That character, in the stage also, I acted in 3 dramas and all in the radios. But it is in my practical experience, the stage drama is very difficult than cinema acting. With these few words, I thank you. लेकिन मेरा क्या आदर है? I had been 6 years president of Borosata Soba, a leading literary organization. So I can deliver hours and hours, लेकिन no time to me. मेरा आदर ये है, I like mankind. I never had woman. I never had human being. With these few words, I thank all the panelists and the chairperson and the madam. And thank you, Saito Academy.
थैंक यू वेरी मच सर। हमारे पास अभी 10-12 मिनट हैं सवाल जवाब के लिए, तो मैं माननीय अध्यक्ष महोदय श्री अरुण कमल जी से निवेदन करती हूँ कि आप सत्र को संभालें।
हम लोगों के पास थोड़ा सा समय है, तो आप लोग अगर कुछ कहना चाहें, कोई टिप्पणी करना चाहें, कोई सवाल करना चाहें, लेकिन बहुत ही कम समय में, ये कहते हुए हमको अफसोस हो रहा है, लेकिन समय बहुत ही कम है, इसलिए सिर्फ अपनी बात आधे मिनट में कहें और किससे कहना है, किससे पूछना है, ये भी बता दें। हाँ, हाँ बोलिए। But he mentioned, he did mention. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
जी.
Sir, actually with your second question, you answered your first question. Because that is exactly what's happening everywhere. As far as Telugu is concerned, I am from Telugu. It's concerned. What you said is right. The main question is, are people really writing about, because we are talking about rural spaces in literature. Okay. That's what I told. I gave an example. Telugu writers did write about villages vanishing, literally vanishing. Apart from that, these are the times of autobiographical literature. I don't know about other languages, but mostly in Telugu, it's all experiential literature that is coming out from various communities, mostly rooted in villages. So we have both Dalit writers and tribal writers writing about their own roots, which is obviously rural. So we are getting a lot of literature in that, positive literature too. But they're at the same time also telling us through their literature the impact of modernity or globalization that is affecting their livelihood. Their livelihood is changing. They can no longer do their professions. They are forced out of their professions. So this type of writing, in fact, I had written it in my original paper, but because it became 10 minutes, I made it concentrate here. So what you said, that is right. There are a lot of people writing in Telugu too about especially experiential literature. These days, literature is mostly experiential rather than an art of observation. So, as you said, they are very much there in all literatures, I presume. I hope I've answered your question.
और भी किसी को लेकिन बहुत ही संक्षेप में, बहुत briefly, very briefly. Yes.
If a Chetan village is developed village, what is the problem with the vanishing?
Okay. Yes. Thank you.
No, the problem is exotic value. And this kind of why this kind of title has came out, that we have a kind of exotic value towards the rurality.
Yes.
Then because of railways.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Thank you. बहुत ही संक्षेप में बस अपनी बात करें. ठीक, बहुत अच्छी बात. ठीक है. थैंक यू. बहुत धन्यवाद. बहुत धन्यवाद.
कृपया सवाल पूछें.
अब हम लोग इस सेशन को खत्म करेंगे. उसके पहले 2-3 बातें मैं कहना चाहता हूँ. आपने 6 भाषाओं के 6 बेहद महत्वपूर्ण लेखकों और विद्वानों को सुना. बांग्ला, तेलुगु, अरुणाचल प्रदेश की जनभाषा, हिंदी, असमी, बोडो, इन 6 भाषाओं के लोग. और ये सभी भाषाएं अपने साहित्य में ग्रामीण चित्रण के लिए भी बहुत प्रसिद्ध हैं. कई भाषाएं तो अभी भी, जैसे बोडो के बारे में उन्होंने बताया, या अरुणाचल प्रदेश की भाषाएं, वो तो जनजातीय और ग्रामीण क्षेत्रों की ही भाषाएं हैं. इसके बावजूद सवाल यह है, हम थोड़ा सा इसके बारे में ऐसे सोचें कि महाभारत और रामायण क्या ग्रामीण जीवन की कथाएं हैं? क्या वहां ग्रामीण जीवन है? महाभारत की लड़ाई तो गांव के लिए हुई थी, 5 गांवों के लिए. लेकिन क्या गांव वहां है? रामायण अरण्य है और पूरा विस्तार है संपूर्ण भारत भूमि का, भारतवर्ष का. लेकिन क्या ग्रामीण साहित्य हम उसे कह सकते हैं गांव का साहित्य? फिर संस्कृत वांग्मय को लीजिए, कालिदास, भवभूति, यहां तक कि मृच्छकटिकम, इस सब में क्या गांव आता है? अगर आप मीर और गालिब को लेंगे, एक नजीर अकबर आबादी को थोड़ा सा छोड़ दें, वहां से लेकर पूरी जो उर्दू कविता और कहानी की परंपरा है, वो किस तरह की परंपरा है? क्या वो गांव के लेखन की परंपरा है? खुद हिंदी में आप छायावाद के काल को थोड़ा छोड़ दें और फिर बाद में रेणु, राही मासूम रजा और प्रेमचंद तो ही, या फकीर मोहन सेनापति, गोपीनाथ महंती, ये सारे लोग जो बड़े लोग हैं जिन्होंने गांव के जीवन को अमरता दी। तो शुरू से ही हम देखते हैं कि विश्व साहित्य में, चाहे वो यूनानी साहित्य हो, चाहे अंग्रेजी का या संस्कृत का, उसमें गांव करके ऐसा अलग से नहीं था या शहर करके अलग से नहीं था, वो जीवन था। लोग थे जो अरण्य में भी थे, गांव में भी थे, नगर में भी थे, लेकिन उनका जीवन था, जैसा हमारे विद्वान साथियों ने बताया भी आपको। लेकिन अभी हम ये सवाल क्यों पूछ रहे हैं यस कि वैनिशिंग विलेज लाइफ? अब देखिए, अगर अंग्रेजी साहित्य को ही आप लें, अभी हमारे एक विद्वान साथी ने, श्रीमती विश्वास ने, उसके बारे में भी बात की, तो आपने देखा कि नोबेल प्राइज जो अंग्रेजी कविता के लिए मिला वो सीमा सीनी को मिला, और अमरीकी स्त्री कवि ग्लिक को मिला अभी हाल में। ये दोनों गांव के जीवन के कवि हैं। पोटैटो डिगर्स हैं, ग्लिक में कुएं पर पानी भरने वाली औरतें हैं, ये तो हैं। तो इस जीवन को भी आना है। जैसे नक्शे में दुनिया का कोई भी क्षेत्र छूट नहीं सकता, वैसे ही साहित्य में भी जीवन का कोई भी क्षेत्र छूट नहीं सकता, छूटना नहीं चाहिए। अब वो गांव बदल रहे हैं, उसके बारे में अभी हमारे साथी ने कुछ बतलाया भी। कुछ लेखकों के नाम हिंदी में तो बहुत हैं, शिव मूर्ति हैं, संजीव हैं, अष्टभुजा शुक्ल हैं, बहुत से, प्रभात हैं, पथिक हैं, बहुत से लोग हैं। तो वैसे ही सभी भाषाओं में है। फिर भी ये सवाल क्यों पूछा जा रहा है? उसका एक बहुत बड़ा कारण ये है कि गांव जिस तरह से हम समझते थे वैसे नहीं है। गांव का मतलब क्या? जहां खेती होती हो, यानी जहां मिट्टी हो, पानी हो, कीचड़ हो, और जहां अन्न उपजता हो। दूसरा, जहां बाजार नहीं हो। पहले किसी भी गांव में बाजार नहीं होता था, 5 गांवों पर एक छोटा बाजार लगता था, फिर 10 गांवों पर, उसको चट्टी कहते थे, फिर वो बाजार वाली जगह होती थी, कस्बा होता था, छोटा शहर होता था, शहर होता था, महानगर वो है जहां सबसे बड़ा बाजार। तो गांव में बाजार नहीं होते थे। और तीसरी बात जो गांव के बारे में खास तौर से थी, जो दुनिया भर के समाज शास्त्रियों ने भी कही है, कि दे वर अनचेंजिंग। बहुत कम उनमें परिवर्तन होता था, नाम मात्र का। तो अब वो गांव नहीं रहे। जितनी तेजी से परिवर्तन पूरी दुनिया में हो रहा है और खुद हमारे देश में हो रहा है, उसके बाद वैसे गांव की कल्पना करना संभव नहीं है। जो प्रेमचंद का गांव या रेणु का, राही मासूम रजा का, या विभूति भूषण बंदोपाध्याय का, या सतीनाथ भादुड़ी का था, वो ममांग जी ज्यादा विस्तार से बताती हैं आपको कि अरुणाचल में भी जो गांव है वो कैसे परिवर्तित हो रहे हैं। तो इसीलिए ये सवाल है, तो क्या हो? राघव चंद्र जी ने कहा कि सवाल ये नहीं कि गांव या शहर का है, वो आदमी के बारे में होता है। मैन इज द डने ऑफ ऑल लिटरेचर। सारा साहित्य मनुष्य के बारे में है, चाहे वो जहां भी रहता हो। अगर अकेले पहाड़ पर भी एक ही परिवार रहता है, तब भी उसकी कहानी समूची मनुष्यता की कहानी हो सकती है। जैसे इडिपस की कहानी, कोई अपने मां से विवाह नहीं करता, लेकिन ये कौन सी ट्रेजेडी है जो सबकी ट्रेजेडी हो जाती है? तो ये भी होता है। अभी माइग्रेशन के बारे में सबने बात की, हमारे हजारिका साहब ने और मामांग जी ने, और तेलुगु की हमारे मृणालिनी जी ने, सब ने बात की, और बोडो के विद्वान ने भी। तो ये एक बहुत बड़ा कारण माइग्रेशन भी है, लोगों का पलायन अपनी जगह से। और उससे जो गांव का चरित्र था, बहुत ही मार्मिक बात बताई उन्होंने अपने नेपाली मित्र के बारे में, कि अगर कोई रास्ता गायब हो जाता है तो मतलब कि वहां जहां जाते थे हम उस रास्ते से, वो जगह गायब हो गई, वो गांव गायब हो गया, वो टोला गायब हो गया। तो साहित्य वो रास्ता है जो छूटी हुई जगहों पर, जो भूली हुई जगहों पर, जो उजड़ गई जगहों पर भी हमको ले जाता है। और साहित्य से हम यही उम्मीद करते हैं कि हमें हमेशा उन जगहों की याद दिलाता रहे और उनमें रंग भरता रहे। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद आपका, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद साहित्य अकादमी का कि एक नए विषय पर उसने परिचर्चा रखी। आप सबका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद, और हमारे सभी विद्वान साथियों का बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
और साहित्य अकादमी की ओर से हम माननीय अध्यक्ष और सभी वक्ताओं को बहुत धन्यवाद देते हैं। धन्यवाद आपका। हम आपको बताना चाहेंगे कि हम लंबा टी ब्रेक नहीं ले रहे हैं। मंच तैयार होते ही हम अपना अगला सत्र आरंभ करेंगे। शाम को माननीय संस्कृति मंत्री का कार्यक्रम है, तो हमें प्रोग्राम जल्दी वाइंड अप करना होगा, तो इसलिए अगला सत्र हम करीब 10 मिनट में आरंभ करेंगे।
आप भी